Hey everyone, it's Jason. Welcome to another Unmatched unboxing. This is for Marvel's Redemption Row. So this is going to give us Luke Cage, Ghost Rider, and Moon Knight. So you get 3 new characters to play against, or play with, rather. And you can mix and match with any other Unmatched set, of course. If you want to know the rules, the link in the description. I did kind of a how to play for the generic Unmatched series. And then we'll go over all the specific stuff in this game. So yeah, we're gonna get some really cool characters in here. So this is kind of the street level, kind of darker side of the game. So we have, this is interesting here. So we have Ghost Rider. It says fire up your health cycle and ready your pen stare for the spirit of vengeance rise tonight. Johnny Blaze commands the power of hellfire, letting him enhance his attacks in diabolical heights. Luke Cage, get ready to see some real power. Man, Power Man is his nickname. This hero for hire, with the daughter of the dragon by his side, is out to take him crash and get paid. So he teams up with Misty Knight. And then we have Moon Knight. Perhaps you could hope to challenge the last vigilante or ruthless investor, even an Egyptian god. Here's the thing, though. We're all in this together. So I have some really interesting gameplay elements. And some other cool stuff there. So let's kind of look at what we got in the box. So we have our brand new board. Let me scooch this out of the way. So we have our new map here. If I zoom down a little bit, is the raft. So we have the raft down there, which is the high security water prison. So yeah, it's had some interesting new elements to the game. Different map style. Zoom back out a little bit. There we go. Full view. So we got different colors. We have a dark blue. We have a gray. We got purple, green. Some regular light gray here. Some light blue. Some red. Plus we have the symbols on there for our brand new mechanic, which we'll just show them off quick. We'll look through these a little bit more. We have battlefield items, which we can add on to the game. Just add some extra either schemes or versatiles to the board that the characters can use, your heroes can use. And then our starting points are in the 4 corners, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, it's also neat though, because like to get in this center area, then it's a ring all the way around the outside, only up and down. So it's not even like this has access to all of those. That's kind of cool, but then it's either get out one of these couple of different ways. So it does add some interesting elements there. Plus then we have like the line across the top and the bottom. Even like right here, it's like you gotta come this way and then this way. So there's a little less connectivity in some of these spots, which is very interesting. Even up like here, it's like 4 up here, center spot, 4 up here. So you can't just go right from that way. So yeah, some interesting setups for how those work. I like the orange right down the center, just by itself, which kind of like links it to the top and the bottom. It's a very interesting map. And if we flip to the other side, it's the exact same map, just now they got rid of all the big colored squares and have the light colored ones. Just for some people that don't want to play with them, or maybe prefer the other side. There's no here or there, still has your little outlines for your little schemes and your other boxes on there as well, for your battlefield items. Then, of course, we're going to have our miniatures. So we are going to have... We'll take just a quick look. We have a Ghost Rider here. We'll take a little bit better look in just a moment. We just want to see what we have. And then Ghost Rider is going to have his health dial and some flame tokens. We'll have Luke Cage and Misty Knight. So they have their health dials and a token. And then, of course, his deck. Power Man's deck where he's punching through. And then we have Moon Knight with his dial and his deck with his 3 of his multiple personalities. So cool, we'll go ahead and hop into them. So we do have our rule book here. Nothing extra new in there, just explaining how the game works, like everything else. And if we get through, it's just going to show them off using cards from this set. And then if we get to the end, it's going to explain the special things for each one, which we'll look at them when we actually get to each character. Definitely cool. Alright, so there's our board. Let's go ahead and hop into our first character. Let's start with Luke Cage, the Power Man, core member of the Heroes for Hire, along with Iron Fist, two main members. He is his secondary teammate. But yeah, he teams up with the Daughter of the Dragons, which is Misty Knight, and the other daughter would be Calling Wing. So it'd be kind of interesting if they ever make a Iron Fist setup. Maybe we get Calling with her. But yeah, here's him just with his big old power gauntlets on. They took a pretty standard form or identity for him, or visual for him. And then we have the little Misty Knight token, so if we want to use her. And then their health dials, just basically the pictures on the cards right there. Alright, so what does Luke Cage bring to the table? So Luke Cage here, and Misty Knight's setup card here. He has melee attack, starting health of 13. She's a ranged character with a health of 6. Luke Cage takes 2 less damage, 2 less combat damage from attacks. When defending, Luke Cage wins combat if he takes no damage, even if he didn't play a card. Interesting. So when he's defending, he always wins the combat. So that's kind of cool for effects. Then he takes less damage. So his signatures and vulnerabilities. So if you're not familiar with Luke Cage, he has Unbreakable Sting, more or less. I'm sure he can be damaged. It's just really definitely hard. So he takes 2 less damage from attacks in an opposing fighter. Only the combat damage reduced. He still takes damage from a card effect, including effects on attack cards. If an attack's damage would be reduced below 0, he is treated as 0. Luke Cage wins the combat. He takes no damage, even if he did not play a card on defense. So basically, if they hit him for 2, he can just not play anything. If they hit him for 1 or 2 damage, he can just not play anything and still win the combat as a defender. So it's kind of neat. But again, it's neat that it's also only for attacks, so if you have something that does a supplement effect, it doesn't affect him. Or it does affect him, rather. Alright, then let's look at his cards. So we got, of course, down here it's going to say how many cool cards for that. 2 copies. We have defense for 2, for Luke Cage with a boost of 1. Power Man. After combat, move the opposing fighter up to 3 spaces. You may move them through other opposing fighters, deal 1 damage to them and each opposing fighter they move through. Interesting. So you basically slam him back through other characters. That's a neat effect. We have 3 copies of a Hero for Hire. During combat, you may boost this attack. Pretty simple. Sweet Christmas, 2 copies. No special effect, but it does 6 damage. Of course, Sweet Christmas is sort of like his catchphrase. He shouts out because he tries not to swear. Yeah, he has a yellow t-shirt and his silver bands. It says a defense for 0 defense, but it says sting like titanium. After combat, if you lost the combat, deal damage to the opposing fighter equal to the combat damage you took. Interesting. So this would be like he's already reducing 2 damage. So basically he has to take more than 2 damage. This would be a great one to, like, if you could drop down when they're doing like a 5 or 6 hit attack, because you're only gonna then take maybe like 3 damage of it. But yeah, or if they boost it up a lot higher or something to try and get over your 2 defense, then yeah, you can basically, oh yeah, great, you finally did 3 damage to me, by playing 5 damage card. But now I did 3 damage back to you. So it's cool. We have 2 copies of his Steam card. Where's my money? Place Luke Cage adjacent to the nearest opposing fighter, gain 1 action. Oh boy. This is just a rush across the field. 2 copies of Getting Paid. After combat, if you won the combat, draw 2 cards. Awesome. Now we have some Misty Knight cards. She has a bionic arm. Is her big thing. She's also a former cop. Got my back. Immediately after, our Misty Knight may swap space with Luke Cage. If she does, Luke Cage is now the defender. Oh, cool. So she can be a ranged character and be there. And then if somebody if somebody's attacking her, she can also, Luke Cage can jump in and be like, boom, no, fight me instead. Daughter of the Dragon, our first versatile card. During combat, Misty Knight is adjacent to the opposing fighter. The value of this card is 6 instead. So that's cool. So she's a ranged character, can do 2 damage, but if she can get right next to him, she can, basically this one, she's kicking them, using some kung fu. But yeah, that's a neat effect. She does a bunch of extra damage. We have 2 copies of Pushback. After combat, move the opposing fighter up to 3 spaces. So this is going to be a good idea of like something like her teaming up with Luke Cage, right? Because she could either that obviously get stuff away from herself, but she could punch or hit him with his first one. They basically could smack them and then smack them closer to the other character or in range of the other character. So it's kind of a fun little back and forth combo. We got 3 copies of Trash Talk. Anyone can use it. Immediately cancel all effects on opponent's card. After combat, you won combat and the turn. 2 copies of Still Standing. After combat, if you won the combat, choose 2 cards in your discard pile and shuffle them into your deck. 3 copies of Commanding Impact. After combat, draw 1 card. And 3 copies of Regroup. After combat, draw 1 card. If you won the combat, draw 2 cards instead. Cool. Yeah, so there's some neat effects there where they do like winning combat definitely is a focus of this deck. That way you can like gain some extra bonuses. Be able to knock the guys around to do extra damage. Or like set them up for combos or save yourself is a pretty good thing. And the whole defense aspect is really neat. So that's kind of the more simple of the 3 decks. That's why we looked at it first. So up next, we have good old Moon Knight. Missed my stand here. So Moon Knight is showing 3 people on there, and we'll look at that in just a minute. It's an interesting concept for this deck. Let's take a look at his miniature. So if you're not familiar with Moon Knight is he wears all white, kind of like, I'd say it's an anti-Batman type thing. He's a hero, an anti-hero vigilante. Pretty cool detail there. It's one of his newer versions with his different chest armor. I think this one has some black on his armor as well. Oh, that's usually wears almost pure white. But he is empowered by Khonshu, an Egyptian god. He's this guy on the bottom. And then in the middle is Mr. Knight. So he has multiple personalities. So that, yeah, he has different personalities, which give him different basically, like, abilities and attitudes and stuff like that. So it's like, each one can kind of do a different type of thing. It's very interesting. So, normally it's like Mark Spector, Jake Lockley, and why can't I think of his third personality? Is Grant. Something Grant. And it'll come to me eventually. But yeah, it's those 3 like civilian identities, but then he can turn into he basically turn into Moon Knight. The one of them turns in Mark Spector turns into Moon Knight. But I think Grant, which I can't remember his name, he can turn into Mr. Knight. He gains powers from Khonshu as well. So this deck actually has 3 different main personality cards. So this is a interesting mechanic for how this deck works. So before we get into that, let's look at this. It says Moon Knight has 3 identities, so he cycles between Moon Knight, Khonshu, and Mr. Knight. Each of these identities has its own character card with its own unique special abilities. Starting the game as Moon Knight, place the other character cards underneath the Moon Knight card in the indicated order. At the end of your turn, you change your next identity. I'm Not Real also lets you change identities during your turn. You can play any Moon Knight's card regardless of which identity is active. As Khonshu, you do not take damage from effects other than combat damage. This includes the opposing hero's special abilities or effects of your cards and your opponents. You only take combat damage. The effects that modify your opponent's attack values work as normal. You have 1 health dial and 1 pool of health. Damage reduce your health regardless of which identity is active. So yeah, interesting. So just to flip between these 3 different versions. So we start off with Moon Knight, who's a melee character who has they all have 16 starting health and they have a move of 3. I'm not real. At the start of your turn, move up to 2 spaces. At the end of your turn, change your identity to Khonshu. So then it flips over to Khonshu. You are my son. Khonshu adds +2 to the value of his attack cards. He does not take damage from effects other than combat damage. At the end of your turn, change your identity to Mr. Knight. So the 1, he gets to move around more, and then at the end of his turn, he switches to 1 where he gets to attack more. So you kind of want to set yourself up good to switch over that. And then when we switch to Mr. Knight adds +1 value to all his defense rolls, and then you change to Moon Knight. I've died before. It was boring, so I stuck up. So it's kind of switching between a defensive character, an offensive character, and a maneuverable character. But generally, you have to go in order, so you kind of have to plan your turns a little bit differently. So it's going to be an interesting game. So he has also an interesting deck. So he has 3 copies here of a totally same thing to do. So now all his cards say any. None of them say Moon Knight on them or Khonshu or Mr. Knight. And they just did that. You could have just said Moon Knight and just been like, just understand that they can all use them. But it's easier just for the sake of the rules just to have any on every single card. So that way you don't have to try and be like, oh wait, what do I do with this and that? It says after combat, you may deal 2 damage to both fighters in combat. Neat. So this is kind of an interesting effect here. So you do this, you do a little bit of damage, but then you can do extra damage. Now if you're playing as Khonshu though, you have him out, your identity, he doesn't take that damage because it's not after combat. So this is the kind of thing you get him up there, he can actually then boost +2 to the value of his attacks, and he doesn't take damage from them. Just switching over to Khonshu with this attack, now it's a 4 and he doesn't take damage. So you kind of have to like play around with these cards depending on who your identity is. Let your insanity guide you. After combat, discard the top card of your deck. Draw cards equal to that card's boost value. 2 copies of the Fist of Khonshu. After combat, if you won the combat, move the opposing fighter up to 4 spaces. We have 3 copies of I'm Not Real. After combat, you may change to your next identities. So here's where you could plan if all of a sudden you think you need to attack more in your next for your next combat. Because you can do combat twice, right? Or you can do stuff twice. Is that right? Am I thinking right? Yeah, because you could attack twice. You could maneuver as, or after combat, then you could use this to switch to your next identity. So maybe you want to switch over to Khonshu after you attack with Moon Knight. That way you have extra attack on your second attack. Or if you're Khonshu, you could switch over to Mr. Knight. That way you have extra defense. Or again, you go the other way and plan for moving. It's kind of a fun little mechanic. We have 2 copies of Travelers of the Night. Move your fighter up to 4 spaces. They may move through opposing fighters, gain 1 action. 2 copy of That's the Part I Like. After combat, if you won the combat, you may look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and discard 1 of them. Place the other 2 back in any order. 2 copies of Good Enough for Us. After combat, you may draw 2 cards. If you do, take 2 damage. 2 copies of Madness Will Keep You Alive. Recover 2 health. If you started your turn in a different space, gain 1 action. That's neat. Alright, 3 copies of We're All in This Together. After combat, if you won the combat, draw a card. 3 copies of Faint. Immediately cancel all your opponent's card effects. Faint is a very common card. It's in lots of the decks. 3 copies of past and present intermingle. During combat, add the boost value of the top card of your discard pile to this card's value. And then the final 3 cards are, that's why I was waiting. During combat, you may boost this attack. So yeah, Moon Knight's going to be a very interesting character. He's going to be lots of moving around and stuff. For various things. He can either get away or close the gap on characters quickly, get away with defense if he needs to. A lot of his effects are based on trying to win the combat. To kind of shares that with Luke Cage as well. One thing I do wish they would have done though is I wish one of them would have been like a ranged character or identity. I think that would have been a lot more fun, or if their moves were different. Just because in that way it would make your positioning or switching to a character a little bit more intriguing. Otherwise, it's just basically I'm just getting a different effect. I get a defense, a move, or an attack effect. But all of a sudden I don't change like, oh, one guy has a lot more move, or one guy has more defense. Not more move, but he has more. I mean, kind of, because I guess he can move up to 2 spaces. So he does technically have more move. But yeah, that's kind of a neat mechanic. So he's going to be a very interesting character to play as. Trying to balance some things out and decide what you need to do. For the most part, though, it's not like game breaking, right? At least, again, they didn't have the cards be like, you have to specifically have this one character out to use this card. They could have done it that way and made like a third of each part of the deck, like for one character. Because they'd never be KO'd, so you could always use them. But it would have also been, like, kind of frustrating as well. Like, oh, I have 3 of these cards and I can't use any of them. It's very interesting. Alright, then we're going to hop into our last character, our last hero. We have Ghost Rider. So, the box does state that it's supposed to be Johnny Blaze. But I have a contention with that, because that motorcycle is Danny Ketch's motorcycle, who is the second main Ghost Rider of the series. Because Johnny Blaze always had more of like a traditional, and I don't know the motorcycle term, like long nose or extended out nose, and just like the regular handlebars. He didn't have the big plate in the front. That was Danny Ketch. He was more of a, because Johnny Blaze is a stunt rider. Johnny Ketch wasn't. So he had more of like a heavily armored type bike. But yeah, that's, and then he also used the chain a lot more than Johnny Blaze did. But I can only go by what they say. So, but it's definitely a cool miniature. It does take up a lot more room versus some of the other characters, but it's not really size proportionate. That's the only other downside. But I guess there's that thing. It's Ghost Rider's iconic. Looks cool when he has his motorcycle. But either he would have been like twice as big, which would have just taken up more room on the board, or you'd have to have him without his motorcycle, which would have made him, I think, look a little less impressive. Alright, but what does Ghost Rider do for us? His special. So we have another melee character. So except for Misty Knight, all 3 of these characters are melee. So this is going to be an interesting game if you're fighting against them, or it might be a good reason to maybe pick up another set. So it says, Ghost Riders. Starts the game with 5 hellfires. So we have these 5 little hellfire tokens. So I can get these up into the camera. Those have little skeleton claws on them, and then if you flip them over, they're just black on the other side. Say Marvel. So it says, when you maneuver, you may spend 1 hellfire. If you do, increase Ghost Rider's move value to 4. He may move through opposing fighters, then deal 1 damage to each opposing fighter he moves through. You cannot destroy one already beyond death, villain. So basically it's him revving his motorcycle up to run through people. So let's look at the rule book for that. Ghost Rider uses Hellfire to fuel his most powerful effects, including firing up his Hell Cycle. Ghost Rider's Hellfire tokens detract his current Hellfire level. He can never be reduced to 0 or increased above 5. So it's always going to be 0 or 5. And it kind of formed like a star. So use the flame side to show the hellfire. Flip the token to the unlit side when they're spent. Use hellfire. Spend one to spend one. Use the hell cycle. Spend one hellfire when you take the maneuver action. Whenever you do this, move your value becomes 4. You may move through opposing fighters. Deal exactly 1 damage to each opposing fighter you move through, regardless of how many times you move through them. At the end of the action, you may move reverts back to 2. So he starts with a very limited action or movement at 2, but he can go up to 4. But it does say you can't run through them, so you can't move 2 spaces towards them and then move 1 space back on top of them and try and run them over 3 or 4 times. There's his dial. Let's start with the most health out of everybody. So that kind of helps maybe make up for his lack of movement. Alright, and what do we have for his deck? We have his penance stairs. So, of course, and if you're not familiar, Ghost Rider. He's any Ghost Rider is possessed by the spirit of vengeance. And what they do is they go around and they can turn into the fiery Ghost Rider form, as well as flame up whatever ride they are. And some people might be more familiar with the newer of the Ghost Riders, Robbie Reyes, who drives a Hell Charger instead of a motorcycle, so he kind of switched it up a bit. Yeah, they're also they're kind of anti-heroes, because they're heroes when they need to be. They usually deal with more of like demons and stuff than like bank robbers. When they do jump in to help any of the heroes, they're usually only trying to defeat people that are performing evil, so they're not really worried again about a bank robber. Like, robbing a bank to them is not really evil. They're looking for more like killers, murderers, things like that. And then he has this penance stare, which is like his big superpower. So he uses his power to attack someone. They have to relive or suffer for every crime or innocent that they've hurt and harmed. So basically, usually it destroys people's minds. Alright, so this is a versatile card for 3. During combat, add the boost value of the opposing fighter's card to the card's value. You may spend 2 hellfire to do it a second time. Oh, so that's neat. So it's a little bit low attack. And then whatever they defend with, you can boost it up that much, and then you can spend hellfire to do it a second time. That's neat. So basically, like, taking their ability and making it more powerful. We have 3 copies of the Spirit of Vengeance, a 5 attack. After combat, you may spend 1 hellfire to draw 2 cards. So here we have all the stuff where we're going to spend hellfire to do extra effects. We have 2 copies of the Steam Change of Hellfire to set your hellfire to 5. So these will let you spend your stuff so you can go ahead and use it again. We have 3 copies of I Brought the Devil With Me. After combat, you may spend 2 hellfire to gain 1 action. 3 copies of I Finally Escaped Hell. After combat, you may spend 1 hellfire to move Ghost Rider up to 2 spaces. 2 copies of Deal with the Devil. During combat, you may spend any amount of hellfire. Increase the value of this card by that amount. Ooh, that's fun. 2 copies of Hell Rides With Me. Move Ghost Rider up to 1 and up to 1 adjacent fire up to 4 spaces each. Gain 2 hellfire and gain 1 action. Interesting. So this would be a fun one to use with like a team mode, 2 versus 2. So you can bring somebody with you. Neat little mechanic. Control the Demon. During combat, this card's value is +1 for each hellfire you have. You do not spend hellfire for this effect. So it starts at 0, so it could potentially be up to 5. Plus, it's a defense card as well. That's always helpful. Stoke the Flames, you have 3 copies. After combat, if you lose the combat, gain hellfire equal to the combat damage you took. So you might take some extra damage just to refill your hellfire. Blaze of Glory. After combat, spend any amount of hellfire, deal that much damage to each fighter in Ghost Rider's zone, including Ghost Rider. Ooh. Again, this could be nasty if you're playing like a team thing, because you could potentially do damage to multiple guys. But you also do damage to your teammates as well, so you gotta watch out for that. Alright, the Wicked Will Burn. 3 copies. After combat, if Ghost Rider started, just turn a different space, gain 2 hellfire. and 2 copies of Faint. Immediately cancel all effects on your opponent's cards. It's kind of interesting. Ghost Rider has Faint and Moon Knight has Faint. So they both have like dodging type abilities. Luke Cage is like, nah, hit me. Whatever. Hit me. So that's pretty cool. Alright, so that's what we have for our 3 fighters. Those are some really interesting things. You just to basically spend this extra resource to do increase or do extra little abilities. But then you have to find a few cards that let you refuel it. Fun. Alright, then the last thing we have are combat items. It's just a brief idea of what combat items do. So they're on the board, wherever they are, your character can now use them as an action instead of a card in your hand. If they're a Steam, they work just like another Steam. For all intents and purposes, if they're not considered a Steam card, so if something specifies a Steam card, it doesn't work on them. But you use them right from that space. So we have a security camera and a secret document. Security camera says, look at your opponent's hand and draw a card. And then a secret document, discard your hand to draw 3 cards. And these can always be mixed and matched with any of the other ones if you have more from the other sets. To give you more options. So we have this, and we also have a versatile. It's a versatile when they're on the board. If you're on that space, you can pick this up and use it on your turn. Before the defender decides to play a card, you can opt to use this to increase your attack value, or if you're in a defense value, when you play your defense card, you can opt to play this with your defense card. So you can increase your stuff. Just if you're attacking, you have to announce it before the defender picks so they know how many they're fighting. So you can't be like 3 and all of a sudden then pop out another one. So Electrified 4, deal 1 damage to each fighter in your zone. I'm guessing that includes you. And then we have a food tray which adds +1. And then the last 2 are a Stun Baton, Electro Baton, and he came at him with the folding chair. Like I can see Luke Cage with a folding chair, but it'd almost be more hilarious to say, like Moon Knight or Ghost Rider running up and bashing someone with a folding chair, right? You know, Ghost Rider, runs up and bashes Daredevil with a folding chair. Just kind of funny. So that's what we have for those. Those are really cool extra things to add into the game. I would honestly love if they had made those for some of the non-Marvel ones, but like more relevant to like the time period. It'd be kind of neat, like if you're playing the fantasy, more like the fantasy things, like you're playing like Robin Hood, like, right? So like, oh, he's got like a wine barrel or something around, or like a sack of coins, right? Something like that. Like obviously they're not going to have the Steam ones, and be a little bit trickier, but you could still have stuff like because you're not going to have all the security devices or electrical things that are going to do things, but you could have, like, Pit Trap or something, right? Oh, someone has Spiked Trap, or, like, Extra Guard or something for, like King Arthur or something like that time frame. A little bit harder sometimes because there's so much mixed and matched around, but it'd be kind of neat if you had some themed things, or, like, one for, like, Alice in Wonderland or something, just each one different thing. Yeah, so here we have Unmatched Redemption Row. I'll hopefully keep picking up more expansions. Like trying to get some of the non-Marvel ones. We can look at some of those as well as we'll eventually check out the Adventures, which are the co-op versions. Hope you guys are enjoying the video. See you guys later. Bye.